The cold morning wind cut through the city like a knife, but it wasn't the weather that made Mason Reed's hands tremble that day. It was the fear of losing everything. As the exhausted single father stepped out of the downtown office building where he worked as a maintenance technician, his mind was drowning in unpaid bills, overdue rent notices, and the growing worry that he might not be able to provide the life his young son deserved. Then, across the nearly empty bus station, he noticed a woman sitting alone on a bench, quietly crying into her hands. He had no idea that one simple act of kindness in the next few moments would completely change the course of his life. Before we begin, if you believe kindness still matters in this world and that every good deed eventually finds its way back, please take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Legacy for more heartwarming stories that restore faith in humanity. The city was alive with its usual daytime rush. Cars moved endlessly through the streets, office workers hurried across sidewalks, and delivery trucks filled the roads with noise. Yet for Mason, everything felt strangely quiet. His thoughts were focused on only one thing: his 8-year-old son, Owen. Ever since Mason's wife had passed away 3 years earlier after a sudden illness, life had become a constant struggle. He worked long shifts maintaining office buildings, repaired broken equipment, cleaned mechanical systems, and accepted every overtime opportunity available. Despite his efforts, money was always tight. Most mornings began before sunrise. He prepared Owen's breakfast, helped him get ready for school, and then rushed to work. Evenings were spent helping with homework, making dinner, and pretending everything was fine. But lately, things had become harder. The company where Mason worked had recently announced budget cuts. Rumors of layoffs spread through every department. Employees whispered in hallways. Supervisors avoided questions. Nobody felt secure. Mason knew if he lost his job, everything would collapse. As he walked toward the bus station that afternoon after finishing a service call, he noticed the woman sitting alone. She appeared to be in her late 30s, dressed professionally, but something seemed terribly wrong. Tears streamed down her face. Her shoulders shook. People walked past without stopping. Some glanced briefly before continuing on. Mason slowed. He knew he couldn't solve whatever problem she was facing. He barely had enough strength to manage his own. But something about her sadness reminded him of the darkest days after his wife died. He remembered sitting alone, feeling invisible while the world continued moving around him. Without thinking much, he approached. The wind was growing colder. He noticed she wasn't wearing a coat. His own jacket was old and worn, but it was warm. He gently offered it to her. At first, she seemed surprised. Then she looked up with red, tear-filled eyes. Mason simply smiled. He didn't ask questions. He didn't expect anything. He just knew that sometimes people needed kindness more than advice. The woman hesitated before accepting the jacket. She wrapped it around herself and seemed to calm slightly. Mason offered a few encouraging words before leaving. He never asked her name. He never expected to see her again. For him, it was simply a small moment of humanity during a difficult day. The next several weeks were some of the hardest of his life. Work pressures intensified. Layoff rumors became reality. Several employees were let go. Every morning Mason entered the building wondering if it would be his last day. At home, expenses continued piling up. Owen needed new school supplies. The apartment's heating system broke down. Unexpected medical bills arrived. Some nights Mason sat at the kitchen table after Owen had fallen asleep, staring at stacks of paperwork and wondering how much longer he could keep going. Still, he refused to give up. Whenever exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him, he looked at a photo of his son smiling during a fishing trip they had taken the previous summer. That smile reminded him why he kept fighting. One Monday morning, an unusual announcement spread throughout the company. The corporation's owner would be visiting headquarters. This almost never happened. Most employees had never met the owner. The company operated dozens of commercial properties across multiple cities. The leadership existed somewhere far above ordinary workers. Employees spent days preparing for the visit. Offices were cleaned. Equipment was inspected. Managers became unusually nervous. Everyone wanted everything perfect. Mason was assigned to help ensure several mechanical systems were functioning properly before the inspection. He worked tirelessly. By the morning of the visit, the building looked flawless. Shortly after noon, black vehicles arrived outside. Executives entered the building. Employees lined hallways. Whispers spread through every floor. Then Mason saw her. The moment the woman stepped through the entrance, his heart nearly stopped. It was the same woman from the bus station. The same woman who had been crying. The same woman who had worn his old jacket. For a moment, he wondered if he was imagining things. But there was no mistake. The woman immediately recognized him too. Their eyes met across the lobby. A look of surprise crossed her face. Then she smiled. A genuine smile. The kind that reaches someone's eyes. Mason suddenly felt nervous. Why was she here? Who was she? The answer came moments later. The building manager stepped forward and formally introduced the visitor. Her name was Victoria Hale. She wasn't simply an executive. She was the owner of the entire company. Mason felt his stomach drop. The woman he had helped without hesitation was one of the most powerful business leaders in the region. Yet during that cold afternoon at the bus station, she had looked like someone carrying an unbearable weight. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Victoria toured departments. She spoke with employees. She asked questions few executives ever bothered asking. Instead of focusing solely on profits and reports, she seemed genuinely interested in the people who kept the company running. Then something unexpected happened. Toward the end of the visit, Victoria requested a private meeting with Mason. Rumors immediately spread. Coworkers wondered if he was in trouble. Managers looked confused. Mason himself had no idea what to expect. His heart pounded as he entered a conference room. Victoria was waiting. Sunlight streamed through large windows overlooking the city. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Victoria thanked him. She explained that the day he met her at the bus station had been one of the worst days of her life. Her father, who had built the company from nothing, had passed away several months earlier. Since then, she had carried enormous pressure trying to lead the business while grieving privately. That particular afternoon had marked what would have been her father's birthday. The pain had become overwhelming. She had left an important meeting and sat alone, struggling to hold herself together. Hundreds of people knew her as a successful executive. Almost nobody knew how broken she felt inside. Then a stranger had offered kindness without expecting recognition or reward. She admitted that she had never forgotten that moment. Not because of the jacket itself, but because of what it represented. Compassion, humanity, decency, the very values her father had spent his life teaching her. Victoria explained that after recognizing Mason during her visit, she quietly reviewed his employment records. What she discovered surprised her. His performance evaluations were excellent. His attendance was nearly perfect. Coworkers consistently described him as dependable and hardworking. Yet his salary remained relatively low. He had been overlooked repeatedly despite years of dedication. Victoria saw something many executives often miss. She saw a man carrying extraordinary responsibilities without complaint. A father doing everything possible to give his child a better future. Over the following weeks, more changes came. Victoria launched a review of employee compensation and advancement opportunities throughout the company. Workers who had spent years being overlooked finally received attention. Departments gained resources they desperately needed. Morale improved. For the first time in years, employees felt valued. Then one afternoon, Mason was called into another meeting. He expected routine paperwork. Instead, Victoria presented him with an opportunity. A newly created facilities management position had opened. The role came with significantly higher pay, better benefits, and a stable future. Mason sat speechless. The promotion would transform his life. It would allow him to move into a safer neighborhood. It would help him save for Owen's education. It would remove the constant fear that had followed him for years. As he signed the paperwork, emotion overwhelmed him. Not because he believed kindness should be rewarded, but because someone had finally seen his effort. Someone had recognized years of sacrifice that had gone unnoticed. Months passed. Life slowly improved. The apartment felt warmer. The bills became manageable. For the first time in years, Mason and Owen took a small weekend trip together without worrying about every dollar. The greatest change, however, wasn't financial. It was hope. The heavy burden that had weighed on Mason's shoulders for so long began to lift. One Saturday afternoon, he sat watching Owen play soccer in a local park. Parents cheered from the sidelines. Children laughed beneath bright daytime skies. The simple scene filled him with gratitude. As he watched his son run across the field, Mason realized how close he had come to giving up during those difficult months. Yet one small act of kindness had unexpectedly opened a door he never imagined possible. Not because he was seeking reward, but because kindness has a way of traveling through lives, creating ripples we cannot see. Sometimes the smallest gesture becomes the turning point in someone else's story. And sometimes, when we least expect it, it becomes the turning point in our own. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like the video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who still believes good people exist. Your support helps Kindness Legacy continue sharing stories that inspire millions around the world. Glowing star special request. Comment below with the words, "Kindness always returns," if you believe even the smallest act of compassion can change a life forever. A year later, Mason stood inside the company headquarters during an employee appreciation event. The building buzzed with laughter and celebration. Workers who once felt invisible now felt respected. Families were invited. Children explored decorated halls. Owen proudly walked beside his father. During the ceremony, Victoria spoke about leadership. But instead of discussing profits, growth, or corporate achievements, she told a story. Without revealing every detail, she described a cold afternoon when a stranger offered kindness to someone who desperately needed it. She explained that true character is revealed not when people know who you are, but when they don't. She reminded everyone that success means little if compassion is lost along the way. As the audience applauded, Mason looked around the room. He saw people smiling. He saw coworkers whose lives had improved. He saw his son standing proudly beside him. And in that moment, he understood something powerful. The jacket had never really been about warmth. It had been about seeing another human being's pain and choosing to care. In a world where so many people walk past suffering without stopping, one small act of kindness had connected two lives forever. And that simple choice transformed not only a struggling father's future, but an entire company's culture. Because kindness doesn't ask who deserves it. It doesn't check job titles, bank accounts, or social status. It simply reaches out when someone needs it most. And sometimes, that single moment becomes the beginning of a miracle no one could have predicted.